Good morning, and welcome to Issues That Matter. And today, which is February 2nd, we have a very interesting show today. But of course, I say that every week. But this week, we have a great guest, a guest that you're probably going to be hearing a lot more from as the months pass. And we don't yet know what's going to happen at the end of those months. But I have SHAWN Moody.
Hey, Bob.
Owner of Moody. Now, I shouldn't say owner, because Moody's Collision Center is a employee-owned corporation. And he's a candidate for governor on the Republican ticket.
Yes.
SHAWN, welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
My pleasure. Now, as we've been talking, and I think I know I asked you this question earlier, but I'm going to ask you so that the viewing audience gets to hear your answer.
Sure.
You're an entrepreneur. What qualities does being an entrepreneur give you that you can tell the public this works for a governor?
Right. Well, I think being an entrepreneur, just to answer that specifically, is, in my view, is a mindset. Entrepreneurial thinking is the ability to think creatively, think innovatively, to take risks. I think so. You don't have to be in business to be an entrepreneur. It's entrepreneurial is really a mindset of how you approach life, problems, maybe starting a business, an organization, or whatever. And I firmly believe, people say you can't run the state like a business, and I say we can't afford not to. And here's why. In running a business, you have to tackle every single problem that faces the state. High cost of health insurance, the opioid addictions, workforce development, training, getting young people engaged in the workforce, mentoring them and coaching them to succeed. So the problems that the small business person faces, and the other key, I think, Bob, is that I wear all those hats. In a big corporation, you've got the marketing department, you've got the sales department, you get finance. When you're in a smaller based company, you've worn every one of those hats. So income statements, balance sheets, capital investment. I'm out there literally like Biddeford, dealing with the late Bob Dodge, citing our shop down here, going through the permitting process, actually physically going out there on the job and building the building, building the crew, which, matter of fact, was a lot of Ray Jansen's former proteges, Don Grenier, Dan Plant, we got Rick Charette, Ken McLeod. These are all Biddeford, they all grew up here, and they're a deep, intricate part of the local community here in Biddeford, and that's why that Moody's in Biddeford's successful.
And how did the employee ownership come about? What prompted you to turn it from a proprietorship to a corporate, to a
they call it an ESOP, yeah. Oh, that's a great question, Bob. I got to step back a little bit. We started as a kid, people know that story. My mom was like 13 years old, and my mom actually got hospitalized for a short period. And I was kind of living briefly on my own. And when she came home, we couldn't stay financially. We couldn't make it. So we ended up living in a mobile home on the other end of town. And I got a job at a Corvette repair shop up the street. So I was, following my passion. I love cars. And I started making some money and saving my money. And at about 16, I was basically living on my own and had, unbridled freedom. And I took full advantage of it. So I actually built that shop. I bought a piece of land and built my first shop in Gorham. I was 17 years old. So I started living the American dream before I was old enough to even vote. And so I think when you look at the history of Moody's, starting from scratch, in about 10 years, we bought an auto recycling, was really a junkyard, Gorham Auto Parts at the time. And we built that into one of the leading auto recyclers in the whole country. And it was acquired by LKQ Corporation in 1998. And I traveled around the country for them for about a year and a half. But in 2001 is when we started growing Moody's, from the one shop in Gorham to a second shop in Scarborough. And what happened is when we sold to LKQ, that was a financial windfall. It was a multi-million-dollar transaction for myself and my family. But it bothered me, Bob, because we had so many dedicated people that helped build that business with me. And they didn't get the financial reward that I did, obviously. And I thought to myself, you know what? We do this again, everybody's going to share in the success. So when we started to grow Moody's, and it was actually when we were building the shop down here in Biddeford, that I actually researched the ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan, and implemented it in 2003. And today, 34% of our company is owned by all of our hardworking coworkers.
That's something.
That's something I'm very proud of. I had another chance to do it, you know, people talk about the distribution of wealth, and I believe in distributing wealth the right way to the people that earn it. And this is a good way to do it.
Yep, I would agree with you. Now, the state obviously faces challenges. Every state does.
That's right.
Some of the challenges are greater in this state than others, but all states face the challenges. What are the challenges that you see facing the state of Maine as we go off into the future?
I think the number one challenge facing the state of Maine is our population is shrinking and our population is aging, as you know, you and I can attest to. So we need to re-engage, you know, our schools. Our school systems, unfortunately, have been promoting opportunities outside of the state. You know, like if you want to make something, there's nothing here in Maine, you got to go chase your dreams outside of Maine. Well, that's simply not true, because a young person today could actually start at a company and become in management or supervisory role very quick, because we're going to have folks retiring. So the first thing that we got to do is convince our educators of the facts that there's tons of opportunity in the state of Maine right now for our young population. The other thing that I would do is have a strategic effort to bring our Mainers back that have left the state. You know, they're starting to raise their families. You know, I can see a Maine family down in Florida where the kids got to go through a metal detector at school. They don't belong there. They know in their heart, that's not right. They're not raise my family in that environment. So we need to solicit them and incentivize them, Bob. Maybe it's a matter of maybe linking up with an employer so we can pay down the student debt, or some way to reunite our families and bring these young, active, energetic people back into our local communities and kind of energize our population and our economy. And I'm convinced that's the way to do that.
Well, I think, you know, Maine over the course of years, Maine has done a good job of educating its people. It's got, you know, we have a high percentage of college graduates here in the state of Maine. Unfortunately, we have lacked the jobs for those college graduates for them to stay in Maine.
Well, I think in the past that was true, but if you talk to any, in the southern part of the state, any growing company right now, whether it's IDEX Labs, you know, WEX, Pratt Whitney, you know, they are struggling to find help. So I think that has come full circle.
Is no longer.
And the other thing I would pick up on, Bob, is I'm, you know, a tradesperson, a blue collar guy at heart, and I would reform our VOC programs and our CTE programs to be the best in the country. We've lost a generation of tradespeople, and there's tremendous opportunity to work in the trades for the students that aren't college bound. We've lost them. You know, they're out on the street, they're getting in trouble, drugs, and we didn't give them a pathway to be successful. Like my case, my last 2 years of high school, when I started that business, I was working in the co-op program. So I'd get out of school at 11 o'clock, Bob, and I'd go work in the shop. I was self-employed, and I get credit for it. And that's how I graduated with my class. We've blocked that group of teenagers right out of the workforce. You can't do anything today until you're 18. I mean, you can't run an orbital sander. It's ridiculous. So change the labor laws, reinstill that work ethic to a teenage population, and they got to figure life out. It exposes them in a job to adults, financial responsibility, handling money. It's critical that we take that younger population, the teenagers, and reinvest in them, and they're going to be our future.
Yep.
And I can do it because I was there. I was that kid at risk. I could have gone either way. People put their faith in me and gave me an opportunity, and I ran with it.
Other challenges that the state might face off into the future. Can you think of any?
Oh, it's a good way to put it.
That's open.
The list of what doesn't need work shorter than, no, we are facing, I believe that Governor LePage has done, he's worked tirelessly to get our fiscal house in order, and at times as controversial as that has been, and I really feel like I have the skill sets to put the growth component on it. So it's not just a matter, you know, you can't cut your way to prosperity. We need to keep our fiscal house in order. Believe there's nobody tighten up. You know, that's my motto, that knows how to save a dollar and how to invest wisely. But at the same time, we've got to grow our economy and we've got to grow our population. So I believe that with my skills and track record of growth, what we've done with our company, that we can build on Governor LePage's fiscal foundation. And I think that's the biggest thing. We have to lower our overhead and the size and scope of state government, right size it to provide the services, lower the costs, but grow our tax base through supporting our small businesses and our business community. And that's where the money comes from. Instead of taxing people more, get more people working, and that's the key.
How do you perceive the relationship between the governor and the legislature?
Tense. Maybe I'm being kind. I think there's a lot of tension between the governor's office and the administration, and especially the Senate. I think the governor, like I say, he's a business guy. So he looks at things a certain way, how to fix and solve problems. Politicians have a different way. They're worried more about the next election than the next generation. And that's a different thought process, which oftentimes collides with Governor LePage's thinking. And so I feel like you've got to have some diplomacy. You work with people. But I'm not the guy that's going to go along to get along. I'll go along if we're going to get ahead. I think Maine people are tired of just getting by. And I think it's time that Maine gets ahead. So I'll go along as that means Maine's getting ahead.
So what specific plans are you working on in your mind? Obviously, you're running for governor. I'm sure you've given some thought as to what you want to do when you make it.
Right.
What are some of the things that you do want to do when you do make it?
I think that, again, back to the population, and again, I want to be clear, I'm the only person to ever serve on the University of Maine System Board of Trustees and the Community College System Board of Trustees. I'm in my third year. And that's the guy that just went right out of high school to work. But what I bring to both of those institutions is collaboration. Those two systems now, you can transfer your credits. If you go to York County Community College, you can seamlessly transfer your credits and go to USM and actually be pre-qualified. That never could happen before. And it only makes sense. So we've been able to take a lot of cost out of the university system so that we could keep tuition low. We're one of only two public university systems that's kept tuition flat 5 out of the last 6 years. We got to keep it affordable. The community college system's tuition is the lowest in New England. So again, working on these boards, two huge institutions, getting them to collaborate, work together for the students.
Do you think the media has given enough coverage to it? Because I have not heard much of that at all.
Right.
Over the years.
Right. Well, and again, I'm not a guy that's jumping up and down, screaming, trying to get attention. I'm just not that type of person. But I think these things will come forward. It's record. And again, I had the vision. Governor LePage asked, what can you do to help the people of Maine? Is there anything at all, Sean, that you could get involved with? And I said, Governor, if you can appoint me to both the university and the community college, then I'd be ready to serve. And I said, I don't be a dub, but if you can't get me on both, and they got enough board members, they're all set there. Because I knew instinctively the only way they're going to work together if you got somebody sitting at both tables.
Good thought.
It's worked. We took USM 3 years ago. The students were protesting. We had a $16 million budget shortfall just 3 years ago. This year, we just put $8 million in the budget stabilization fund. Enrollment increased for the first time in 6 years.
What turned the key?
Leadership. Making tough decisions and getting the right leadership in place. Rebuilding the trust, providing transparency to the students and the faculty, and collaboration, involving everybody. It's what happens as an institution. You know this better than anyone, Bob. When an institution grows, like government, it becomes very siloed and very bureaucratic. So the entrepreneurial thinking that you started this conversation out with is gone. It's just rigid. So me, being a free-spirited, innovative guy, comes in and asks the questions. Why can't we transfer these credits? Well, this, that, and everything else. No, let me ask again. Why aren't we transferring these credits? These kids can't afford to take the same courses over again and pay double. Well, and once you open people's minds up to collaboration, then they get excited about it. It's like, you're right, we got to figure this out. So it's getting people to identify the problem, get the right people around the table, and work towards a solution. It is a process to problem solving.
Now, one of the issues that has been on the plate every year for, I want to say as long as I can remember, but I don't know that my memory goes back that far. Medicaid expansion.
Right. Again, it's probably not a popular answer, but here's how I feel about it. The Affordable Care Act, when that was implemented, I think in 2010, has never followed through on what was, like you talked about earlier, Bob, government is horrible at cause and effect. So, okay, if we do this, there's an action, what's the reaction? The unintended consequences.
The unintended consequences.
And what that Affordable Care Act was predicated on was the fact that younger people, the healthy population of customers, so to speak, were going to buy insurance at discounted prices, subsidized. And if you're 28 years old off your parents' insurance, you have no assets, you don't have a home, I don't care if it's $200 a month for health insurance, that young person's not going to buy it because they're going to say, I don't need it. I don't have the money. So then that's when the system started to, kind of be collapsed under its own weight. So I voted no on the Medicaid expansion because of this simple reason. That money is a bailout for the insurance companies and the hospitals. It's not targeted for our most vulnerable, the elderly, the people that are in need. It's not targeted for that population of people that need it most. It's to supplement the young people that aren't paying the premiums. And to me, that's just not right. We need to fix the Affordable Care Act. We're gonna tackle health insurance here in the state of Maine. We're not gonna wait for the feds to come up with another grandiose plan that's gonna cost us hundreds of millions of dollars and not work.
What do you see that health plan looking like?
I think we need to do exactly what we did back in the 80s with workman's comp. Workman's comp was in a crisis back in the 80s. Yep. All the carriers were pulling out of the state. It was a disaster. It was crumbling. And they formed a Blue Ribbon Commission to study healthcare cost, mandates, and insurance. And that spawned a company called MEMIC, Maine Employers Mutual Insurance Company.
Yep.
And that company grew from, I think it was around $150 million to a $2 billion organization. And we're getting checks back, rebate checks, how well that system runs today. It's exactly what we need to do with healthcare here in the state of Maine. As a matter of fact, John Leonard just retired, the CEO of MEMIC. And he is personally committed to me in the Moody administration to form that commission. That's the way I think. You get the right people, the right initiatives, that's how you get things done.
Abortion. That's always a hot topic.
Yeah. I'm pro-life. I've married, got 4 beautiful children, young adults. And I feel like if we talked about adoption as much as we did abortion, that in and of itself would be a huge help to uniting, babies and infants into loving families and households. So I think that abortion is a very personal, independent. I'm a man. I'm not going to make a decision on that myself. But personally, I'm pro-life. I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and it's a very sensitive issue, as you well know.
Nathan Sawyer, who I guess is a pollster of some. To be honest with you, I don't even know what his background is.
Okay.
But he did a poll, and the poll was to find out what issues are important to Maine at this moment.
Wonderful. And
these are some of the things that came up in this poll. In the poll.
Great.
Number 1, infrastructure.
Yeah. I think that's a national problem. President Trump in his union address, $1.5 trillion, which again is controversial because, as you were saying, we got $20 trillion in debt. It's like, oh my God, when's it going to stop or end? But Maine desperately needs to address its infrastructure. I think that's one of the things that at every local community, when the mill rate gets pressured, the first thing that gets cut is paving and road construction at the local level and at the state level. And we've got a big deficit there to make up. We need to prioritize infrastructure spending, no question.
Okay. How about ending the refugee issue?
The way I feel about refugees and asylum seekers, I don't think anyone should come to America unless they're fully vetted, they've been security clearance, whatever, and they're able to join the workforce. What happens now with that population of immigrants They come over here, Bob, and think about it. They may want to come here for the right reasons and add to the economy. They won't let them work for 6 to 12 months. You basically ruin them. You're coming over here to live the American dream. You want to work hard and get ahead and add to America. And all of a sudden now you're being supported after 6 months or a year. That they just get used to that. They think this is America.
I work.
That's not America. America was built on immigration, of people coming over here that were hungry, that were motivated, that wanted to build a better life for their family.
So
the federal government has interrupted that by allowing people to come into our country that aren't able to go into the workforce.
What I'm hearing is that we are training them to become non-contributory to the American dream.
Right, exactly. But it's a federal bureaucracy. It's not the people. I'll give you an example. You could take our best coworker, and we got some good ones, and they could have an injury, a lost time injury, and it's proven. Psychology proves it. Once you move past, I think it's 6 weeks into 7 weeks of not being employed, it changes your psyche. So you could take your best coworker, keep them out of work for 6 months, and they will struggle to re-engage the workforce. Now, this is a hard-working American. So you can imagine when you take a non-American coming to the country, they don't work for a year. It sets up that cycle of dependency it's really, it's almost, it's inhumane to do that to a person. I mean, we know, the federal government knows these things. They do these studies. It's like, don't bring those people into America until they're ready for their own benefit to add to our local communities and our economy.
You mentioned, we talked about Medicaid. One of the factors that I became aware of back a short while ago on one of my shows was the fact that the opioid crisis is negatively impacted by people on Medicaid. People on Medicaid tend to be more susceptible to opioid addiction.
Exactly. Yeah, the opioid, it is a crisis, and I think that's the proper name. It's a crisis. And I'm not, you hear the expression, you got to hit something head on. Well, anybody who's been in business a while knows that, you've got to surround a problem. And I think we got to surround this opioid crisis, and I want to step you through it. Number one, we have to beef up law enforcement. These are criminal organizations, predicating our most vulnerable people. They seek them out, and they get in there and get them hooked. So law enforcement has to have the tools and the training and the resources they need to do the job. Secondly, the people that are in crisis, that are addicted, need help. We need to help them. And the path to sobriety, in my opinion, is most successful with peer-to-peer help. People that have been addicted, kind of like AA, for people that have been involved in alcoholism. It's a group of people that have overcome the addiction, that are sober, that are out there in the community working and rebuilding their life.
They not only have talked the talk, they've walked the walk.
Exactly, Bob. And we need sober houses for this to take place. I'm a big advocate for that environment. And then third, education. The best way to keep someone off drugs is for them to never try them. So I remember when I was a kid, I bet you remember this, they used to have a frying pan with an egg in it. And that egg was burning up. And they said, that's what your brain is going to be. It's going to be fried if you do drugs. And I think that's a provocative way to message parents, to remind them, this can happen to your child. And you need to be super aware of who they're hanging around with, what they're spending their time doing. And during those formidable years especially, nothing that takes the place of good parenting.
I would agree with that. I also think that the medical community has to be a little bit less inclined to prescribe painkillers.
I couldn't agree with you more, Bob.
Because
they're a part of the problem, a big part of the problem. Big pharma, let's face it, corporate America, greed, profits. Capitalism can be ugly. And I think this is the case in point. When they prescribe that, when you get I used to read the parade on the Sunday paper.
Yep.
I stopped reading it because they cut it down to about this size, and a third of it was drug companies pushing the medications and half the disclaimers on side effects. Well, isn't being addictive a side effect? If you're prescribing medication that's addictive, well, how did the FDA even approve? You know, it's just, you got to be a little cynical, right, to see what's going on.
That's the cycle. You
Exactly.
take the medication, you get hooked on the painkiller,
Right.
and once that prescription runs out,
You're on the street, buying it cheap.
you're still addicted.
Exactly. It's a crime, it really is, and I think we need to treat it as a crime and go after those drug companies and those, you know, the providers for taking advantage of the people in the system. It's not right. You know, we'll fight that tooth and nail.
And I think you've already covered this one, but bringing jobs back to Maine.
Right. Exactly. It's interesting. I've traveled the whole state, you know, on the university system, community college up in Fort Kent, Washington County, you know, Farmington, all these campuses. And what Maine is, the situation in Maine is not unique in the country, but we've got areas like southern Maine, economically are doing very well. And there's not enough people to do the work. You try to hire someone today, it's very difficult, 3% unemployment, whatever it is. However, to your point, Bob, you go to our rural communities in the northern, you know, eastern and western parts of the state, and they're dying. They need economic activity. They need jobs desperately.
What do you see the governor or the government being able to do to rectify that situation? That's been the situation for a good amount of time now.
That's right. I think it really revolves around skills. You know, we've got to, like I said, we're going to reform the VOC programs and the Career Tech programs to be the best in the country. Here's how we'll do it. And these people are passionate. We've got some great programs, but we've got some other programs that could be improved significantly. I would make it a requirement for a tech instructor to work at a best-in-class business in their respective field 2 weeks out of the year. That way, they know exactly what these businesses need in terms of what are the processes and products that they use, what's the best-in-class business's operation, what are they innovating. So when that instructor gets back in the classroom, they can teach that subject matter passionately and relevantly, like what's going on right now, and it also creates a pathway for placement. So that employer can say, hey, we need three coworkers this spring. Who you got coming out of your program? You're going to already have jobs lined up for them. So that's where the blue-collar trades is missing in academia. The blue-collar trades are supervised and accredited by white-collar administrators. And industry is not directly involved, and it needs to be. Because let's face it, they don't know what they don't know. They don't know if that voc instructor is on their game or not. But we do. When we get the student out and we're trying to teach them the trade and we're seeing what they were taught, trust me, there's a huge room and opportunity for improvement. So up in the northern, western, and eastern parts of our state especially, these young people need skills and they need to learn the trades. And that will rebuild the entrepreneurial thinking and that economic, because it's not no big company's going to go up there. It's small businesses, these small businesses that we got to incubate and innovate to get them to grow.
It's been my thought for quite a while that we put so much emphasis on college graduation.
Exactly.
And we've de-emphasized the trade skills.
I think you're being kind.
The world.
Academia looks down their nose. Let's face it. Let's just say it.
The world will always need plumbers and electricians.
Maine is a blue-collar state, and we've turned our back on it. And that's why our young people are struggling. It's not the people that go on to aspire, which they should, to higher ed. They leave the state. And the people that don't aspire to go to college, like I didn't at that age, we're losing them. And now they're becoming a liability in society instead of an asset. And I take responsibility for that. We can change that culture and restore the pride in working with your hands and learning a trade.
How do you change that culture?
You get out there and you call people out on it. And you identify that population of students earlier. We need to be working on this in junior high, middle school, because that's when these young people are formidable, the ones that like working with their hands. Give them the exposure to some healthy adversity, change the labor laws so they can actually work. We'd hire high school students All they can do at Moody's is push a broom. It's ridiculous. But yet we go, and my kids played sports. I love sports. Go Pats. But what's are you going to get injured on the football field or running a pneumatic sander at Moody's? Give me a break. So we've blocked out. We've just suffocated our kids, protected them too much. And by the time they get 18, 19, they're vulnerable. They're not street smart. They don't know how to handle money. They don't know how to interact with other adults other than the parents. And we'll change that culture, no question.
Do you see every dollar spent by government as being effectively spent?
Holy, I'm going to fall out of my chair. God, no. I mean, look at the Turnpike Authority. I mean, New Hampshire doesn't have a separate. We would merge the main Turnpike Authority into the Department of Transportation. Still collect the tolls. We need the revenue. But all the they have a $12 million facility. I mean, there's millions of dollars out there in redundancy facilities that we could turn and sell, get the money, and turn those facilities back onto the local tax rolls because they don't pay any taxes. So now you're boosting your local tax revenue and you're liquidating state assets, you're combining resources. I mean, a private enterprise would do that in a heartbeat, and that's one example of what we would do.
Okay, I'm trying to process that in my mind.
There's all kinds of opportunities. Bob, when you think of it, come at it from a business mindset, we're not going to compromise the road network or the infrastructure, the plowing. It's not a matter of selling trucks or anything. It's brick and mortar. We don't need 10 maintenance facilities, 5 for the DOT and 5 for the Turnpike Authority. We'll eliminate these 5 and just keep the strategically placed ones to maintain our service level. When you go through government like schools, for example, every time we build a school, we build a brand new school. All throughout the state, why can't we have a model that you could replicate in our different communities? And if they want to dress it up a little bit with local dollars, so be it. But reinventing the wheel every time has a huge price tag to it.
That's a concern that I've had in the community that I live in. How many people we're just in the process of revamping our high school,
right,
and turning it into a campus, which arguably it may be necessary.
Right.
I'm not one who's absolutely convinced of it, but it may be necessary. But in any event, it's costing a lot of money.
Exactly.
And my concern is how many people are we going to tax out of their house?
Right. Property taxes are going through the roof. And again, what happens is, you go by Moody's, go by a benefit shop. That building is, let's say, 03, is 14 years old. You go inside it, go around it. That building looks like we built it last year because we take pride in our facilities and we keep up with them, we maintain them. A lot of times the local municipalities, what do? They let the building fall apart. Hey, we need a new building. That's irresponsible. So we need to get back to, let's take care of things. Take some pride.
Where do you see the governor being able to play a part in that enhancing the level of responsibility?
I think you lead by example. We would apply that at the state level first, and then we would vocally and aggressively get this out to the local communities, the municipalities. Look, you can consolidate a lot of your operations. Why do you have a public works department and then a school facilities department? That's just redundant. And why doesn't a town just have one governing body for the town and school together? That's where you get collaboration. It's like the university system and the community college. The two separate entities, very inefficient, very ineffective. Take a town and use it as a model. Go to a smaller town and let's innovate. Let's try it. Have the school board and the council be one, and have the facilities management be one. Have the accounting, the human resources. Everything should be done once, not duplicate every service within the local community. It costs a fortune. It's not sustainable.
Yep. And let's see here. We may have touched on this already, but maybe we can go into a little bit deeper. Government-run heroin issues or heroin houses.
I'm about treatment and cure. It's this. Just like Narcan. You know, Narcan, if someone's on the floor, there's not a Maina in the world that wouldn't do everything and anything to save that person's life. But again, you know, when is that person going to be focused on saving their own life? That's what we need to do, is to get people to understand they're at the bottom, they're at rock bottom, and give them a pathway to sobriety. That's the only answer. You know, to just keep, you know, giving people, you know, an opportunity to kind of stay addicted, to me does not make any sense at all.
What might that pathway look like?
As I described before, sober houses. I'm convinced peer-to-peer, people that have been down, and employers, given the right incentives, would work with the drug education and the drug treatment facilities and community, given the right incentives to help these people become employed, get some income coming in, and again, it's rebuilding their life. They're not going to go from addiction to sobriety. That's a process, that's a path. That could take months, it could take a year. But if we're not focused on that, and all we're doing is focused on continuing to allow people to live in addiction, we're not focused on the root cause of the problem. And the other thing, Bob, is the vulnerability factor. Let's go back to the teenage population. The idle hands are the devil's workshop. We have a lot of teenagers sitting home, playing on the phone, playing on the computer, getting into things you and I both know there's no way they should be getting into. Greater Portland needs help. Biddeford needs help. You can't drive down the street without seeing a help wanted sign. So why aren't we change the labor laws to get these teenagers out into our local communities, into the economy, build some self-esteem, build some self-confidence, know how to handle money, and deal with adults and problems? That's part of a community's responsibility to provide those things. And state government and the federal government blocks that from happening. When you and I grew up, we were baling hay, we were pumping gas. I had my first job at like 10 years old delivering newspapers, handling money, dealing with people. That set the stage for me to get into my own business.
Now that at this conversation draws my mind into the minimum wage issue.
Exactly. Federal government, the state government is telling business how to run their business, and the businesses resent it. That the minimum wage was put in place, and they're really, like, we don't pay minimum wage. Most employers don't. That's why I say to young people, and I've talked to a lot of them all across the state, when you're young, pay less attention to what you earn and more attention to what you learn. So don't just take that job for 50 cents more an hour if you're not learning, if it isn't stimulating and growing you, challenging you. So it's less about the money, Bob. And we, again, it's employers resent being told how to run their business. Whether it's, you know, paid sick days, the minimum wage, you know, what we're going to pay in certain things. It's like, you want to say to the government, say, you know what? And that's part of me why I'm running for governor. We're going to go up there and tell them how to, and show them how to run their business. Because they're always got their, you know, finger on us. And in the small business community is struggling because there's so much bureaucracy, it's crushing them.
And I think President Trump touched on that in his State of the Union message.
Right. It's hard as a small business. It's 10 or 12 hours a day, 6, sometimes 7 days a week when you're starting up. It's a commitment. And so that's why I say follow your passion. Find something you love to do because you're going to do a lot of it. A lot of sacrifices to make it. And it's the bureaucracy. If you haven't ever been in business,
you never know what it's like.
You just don't understand. So again, that resentment continues to build in the business community, small business community, because everybody's mad at corporate America. Well, guess what? Small business, we're not the enemy. I'm not disagreeing there's corporate greed and things like that that have to be addressed and attacked. But meanwhile, back at the ranch in local Biddeford Saco area, you've got an incredible amount of good, hard-working small businesses that make this community run. It's the lifeblood of these communities.
And it's the lifeblood of the economy. Statewide economy, exactly. And indeed national economy.
Small business is the backbone of America. And I started living the American dream at 17, and I feel a responsibility to help this next generation have the opportunity to feel the American dream too.
Yeah. Well, of all the things that we've discussed today, and I'm sure there's a lot more that we could discuss if my mind was working fast enough to think about them, Of all the things we've talked about today, what would be the takeaway that you would want people to take away from this show today?
Boy, I would say that, like I said earlier, is, Mainers are tired of just getting by. It's always something. Your health insurance costs are going up, taxes are going up, and I think deep down, Mainers are just, they just want to get ahead, and that's what we're going to focus Maine on, is helping people move forward and get ahead, have some hope that we can restore Maine's pride and work ethic in our younger generation, because that's the key to our future. And I think Biddeford-Saco, especially Biddeford, is a great example of back when we met Bob Dodge, the late Bob Dodge, a wonderful man. Microline had just closed down. You saw Nissen, close down. Biddeford was in crisis. The mills were closing down. And you see over the last 10 or 12 years, kind of shifting to a more retail-minded, economy, what Doug Sanford's done in Saco with the mill rehabilitation. So Biddeford's kind of a model of reinventing itself. It takes time, but that's what we need to do in the other areas of our state, like Sanford, for example, Lewis and Auburn. Biddeford-Saco can serve as a great example of an economy in crisis that had to rebuild and reinvent itself over a 10 or 15 year period, and now heading in a pretty prosperous direction. I'm bullish on Biddeford. I really feel like, the stage is set for economic growth here in Biddeford. And I'll tell you, Biddeford people, we've been proud, and thank you for their business, I'll tell you. Biddeford people are the most proudest, most loyal people in the state of Maine. They have that work ethic, generationally. And what they're looking for is a governor, a leader, that will restore that same opportunity to our next generation. That's our key to Maine's future. We've paid a lot of attention to our exit plan, retirement, and things. We're an aging state. We've taken our eye off our entry strategy to get our young people to stop leaving the state, keep them here, and bring our young people back and reunite our families and build those stronger communities and families right here in Maine.
Sounds like an idea to me.
We can make it happen.
Shawn, thank you very much.
Thank
it's been
you.
a pleasure having you on
Bob,
as a guest.
Thank you. You're a great host.
Have a great day. Stay warm. And I think I would be remiss if I did not end the show by saying, go Pats!
Hey, go Pats!
Bye-bye.